This morning at 10 a.m. we had quite a celebration. There were so many 2-year-olds you would not believe. And in that laughter and noise, we celebrated. We celebrated a new joy, celebrated new life, celebrated new possibility, celebrated liberated joy, the joy of Christmas. And I'll tell you, it was good. It felt good to celebrate, to think of a babe born, welcomed with such love, even as it was welcomed into a manger. That Christmas story fills me with hope. And this Christmas, this year, the Christmas story also reminds me of babes born this day in Bethlehem, and it's in neighboring communities in Gaza. The parallels between 2023 and the biblical story are pointed, and I want to share some of them with you, because I know sometimes we Unitarian Universalists don't know our Bible stories as well as we should, even when we just heard it a few minutes ago. So the Jews and the Samaritans and the other residents of that land that we now know as Israel did not feel connected religiously, ethnically, or socially to those in power, neither Herod or Pontius Pilate. Many Israelis and even more Jews today do not feel represented by Netanyahu, nor do many or most Gazans feel represented by Hamas. Jesus was told he needed to go and get onto a government registry. Every Palestinian birth in Gaza, death in the West Bank, marriage in Jerusalem, or change in address in Galilee must be registered into Israel's Interior Ministry database in order to legally exist. Without being on that database, you're not allowed to travel, work, open a bank account, or even emigrate to another place within the territory. It is a registry of control. Despite the dangers of traveling, especially when pregnant, Mary was mandated to travel by said government. And this was no mere journey. Today, it was like a journey down the aisle that took about 10 seconds. But they actually calculated out, and traveling by foot or donkey, if one was traveling 8 hours a day, it would have taken 8 days when pregnant. Of the 2.3 million Gazans, 1.9 have been ordered to leave their homes. Like Mary and Joseph, there have been no real places to take them in. Nowhere in the gospel story do we hear of Mary or Joseph being offered food. And in comparison to the level of need, there is virtually no food in Gaza. The aid trucks just don't cut it. And all throughout the Gospels, there are whispers and even proclamations of murderous intent. 1,200 lives on October 7th, over 20,000 since then, 9,000 children. If Jesus were to be born today, he would be born under the rubble in Gaza. Under the rubble in Gaza. These were the words for the Christmas sermon delivered by the Reverend Dr. Muntha Isaac at the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem today. And I agree with Reverend Isaac, who is a Palestinian Christian theologian, when he told his congregation that the Christmas message is not about Santa or trees or gifts or lights. It isn't in any way about the commercialization of Christmas. The Christmas message is about Jesus, who miraculously survived a massacre, who was born among the occupied and the marginalized. Jesus is in solidarity with us in our pain and brokenness. It's been the most morally excruciating 3 months. And everything that has happened in Israel and Gaza has broken my spirit and pained my conscience. And I have learned that just like in the story when things got really bad, when the unjust and the powerful were sharpening their swords for the most vulnerable, that's when Christmas comes. And so I ask, what is the theology that we need to remember this Christmas that's buried in the rubble? First, all the Abrahamic faiths, the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, are united in their theological ancestry. They all worship the God of Moses, who led their ancestors to liberation and required them to covenant to put their God ahead of any leader, any state, any political party or agenda. Nothing in the Torah, nothing in the Quran, nothing in the Gospels, and nothing in this Christmas story, nothing in our UU theology, nothing teaches us, commands us, suggests us to stand with the oppressor against the oppressed. As the Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann writes, the Exodus testimony, this most radical of all of Israel's testimonies about Yahweh, verifies that the God of Israel is a relentless opponent of human oppression, even when oppression is undertaken and sponsored by what appear to be legitimate powers. This was the God of Jesus. This is the God of the infant in the rubble in Gaza. Now, in the story, Jesus is just a baby, but it is impossible not to remember the leader and prophet and teacher that he would become. In his ministry, Jesus sought to foster renewal among his people, in part by expanding the scope of who would be included among the people of the covenant, i.e., the Jews. In doing this, he came in conflict with religious leaders, the Pharisees, who were more restrictive. And it's important to understand why they were, because these leaders, what they were really saying was who and who was not Jewish enough. And this litmus test of who was being Jewish enough was all about their maintaining state-sponsored political stability of this Jewish elite. In contrast to them and their political agenda, Jesus talked about being faithful to God and to the God within each other first, as was commanded in the First Testament and those that followed. But Jesus wasn't only about the Jews. Jesus was about expanding the scope of respect and inclusion. He worked to include those of other religions, ethnicities, places, genders, mental health status, financial status. Jesus practiced and preached that there was no border to beloved community. Now, Jesus sometimes is considered nice in how he tried to get along with everyone, but it is more than that. I recognize how important it is. Genocide Watch, an organization that watches the development and actions of genocide globally, notes that there are 10 stages to genocide, essentially 10 actions that allow genocide to occur. And you could go on their website to learn about each one, because it's valuable to understand their nuances. Genocide Watch considers the war in Israel and Gaza to be at stage 3, discrimination, stage 4, dehumanization, stage 5, organization, stage 6, polarization, stage 8, persecution, and stage 9, extermination, all at once in an ongoing cycle that supports each other. Now, Genocide Watch also shares actions that can reduce or counter each stage. And I'll tell you this, Jesus' messages of inclusion and forgiveness would directly counter several of the stages of genocide that we're seeing now. In short, if people practice the religion by Jesus instead of Jesus a little bit more, we'd have some more peace and more community and more babes in arms tonight. Or maybe if Jesus isn't quite your guy, just remembering to follow his example, following a God or a source or an ethical commitment to human liberation. If we do that, then maybe the genocide could stop. Let me point out one other similarity between today and the gospel story, because it is an ocean away and we are here. Herod and Pontius Pilate were vassal rulers. They could not maintain their position, power, or brutality if it were not for Rome's approval and army. In fact, I just learned this for this sermon, Pontius Pilate was recalled to Rome for his genocide of the Samaritans. What does this suggest to you about the U.S.'s relationship with Netanyahu? I'll let you answer that for yourself. So let me go back to the words of Reverend Isaac in Bethlehem when he said, "Let it be clear, silence is complicity and empty calls for peace without a ceasefire and an end to occupation, and the shallow words of empathy without direct action are all under the banner of complicity. The true Christmas message is that this genocide must stop now." I want to end with just one word, shalom, which means peace. And shalom comes from the root word shalom, which means complete, perfect, and full. The shalom, peace, is much more than the absence of war and conflict. It is the wholeness that the entire human race seeks, a wholeness within, a shalom within, and a shalom with each other, a wholeness, a unity of all humanity. May we experience that shalom and shalom. May it be so. Amen.